Alright, YouTube, I got some breaking news for you guys. This is titled The Latest FBI Field Sentenced to Life in Prison. This is from the Associated Press. This is take two, by the way. 36 minutes ago in Charlottesville, Virginia, AP. The latest on the sentencing of a man who deliberately drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters at a white nationalist rally, all times local, and then I'm going backwards here. 2:10 p.m., an avowed white supremacist who drove his car into a crowd of anti-racism protesters during a white nationalist rally in Virginia has been sentenced to life in prison on hate crime charges. James Alex Fields Jr. of Maumee, Ohio, was sentenced Friday after pleading guilty in March to federal hate crime charges in an attack that killed one person and injured more than 24 others. Will be sentenced next month, or rather he will be sentenced next month on separate state charges. Fields apologized before the judge handed down his sentence. The quote-unquote Unite the Right rally on August 12, 2017 drew hundreds of white nationalists to Charlottesville to protest the planned removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Fields admitted deliberately driving his car into counter-protesters who showed up to demonstrate against the white nationalists. The case stirred racial tensions around the country. No, it didn't. 2 p.m. The mother of a woman who died when an avowed white supremacist rammed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia, says she wants James Alex Fields Jr. to spend the rest of his life in prison, but hopes he can also get the help he needs. Speaking during Fields' sentencing hearing Friday, Susan Brose said she hopes Fields can, quote heal someday and help others heal, end quote. Her testimony was Her testimony was one of more than a dozen statements given by survivors and witnesses to the 2017 attack. Fields appeared stoic, stared straight ahead, and didn't look at any of his victims. Rosia Parker said she was standing feet away from Bro's daughter, Heather Heyer, when Heyer was struck. Looking directly at Fields, she remarked that he, quote, could have done anything else but what you did, end quote. Quote, so yeah, you deserve everything that you get, end quote. 11:40 a.m. Prosecutors have told a judge that an avowed white supremacist responsible for a deadly car attack in Charlottesville, Virginia was, quote, like a kid at Disney World, end quote, during his high school trip to a German concentration camp. FBI Special Agent Wade Douthat read grand jury testimony Friday from the high school classmates of James Alex Fields Jr. The classmate said Fields appeared happy when touring the Dachau camp and remarked, quote, this is where the magic happened, end quote. The statement provided audible gasps from a packed courtroom crowd that included dozens of people who were injured and the mother of a woman who was killed when Fields deliberately drove his car into a group of counter-protesters at a white nationalist rally in 2017. The testimony came during Fields' sentencing hearing. Prosecutors have asked for life in prison. The defense has asked for an unspecified time that is less than life. And at 11:05 a.m., federal prosecutors are asking a judge to give a life sentence to a man convicted of hate crimes for plowing his car into a crowd demonstrating against a white nationalist rally 2 years ago in Virginia. But lawyers for James Alex Fields Jr. will argue the 22-year-old man deserves some leniency because he had a traumatic childhood and a history of mental illness. A sentencing hearing is scheduled Friday in Charlottesville. Prosecutors argue that Fields deserves life in prison for killing a woman and injuring dozens of others when he deliberately drove his car into the anti-racist demonstrators on August 12, 2017. Fields' lawyers argue that a sentence shorter than life is appropriate because of Fields' young age and his struggles with mental illness. Okay, for starters, the Unite the Right rally was organized by a person called Jason Kessler. Jason Kessler is somebody that works for George Soros. And George Soros, along with Terry McAuliffe, organized this whole thing. They had two buses show up to what is called a white nationalist rally, but in reality there were whites and blacks there that were protesting the removal of the statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee, because that's part of their heritage, it's part of their culture. So these buses showed up. One bus had Antifa, the other bus had white nationalists, and they had like t-shirts and everything to clearly demonstrate that, yes, this is where we stand. Then they got off the bus, then they started hitting each other, and started hitting the people that were protesting there, peacefully, mind you. things got a little crazy. This guy, James Fields Jr., he got into his car after he had been attacked by a bunch of Antifa members, and what happened is that he did drive his car through a crowd of people, but he did not hit Heather Heyer. Heather Heyer died of a heart attack on the scene, and if you ever see the footage of her getting put on the stretcher, you could see her body. She was a very overweight person. She was allegedly a very heavy smoker as well, so people like that tend to have heart attacks, especially in high stressful situations like the one that we saw unfold that day. There were no... the organic protest that was there was not a white nationalist rally. It was just locals in Charlottesville that were protesting the removal of the statue. Now, Ryan Dawson could probably back me up on this because he's from the area, and he has actually talked a lot about Charlottesville in the past. So this is very shameful reporting from the Associated Press. We obviously know that fake news is going to be everywhere, even from even from supposedly biased or unbiased sources such as the AP and Reuters, but they clearly have an agenda now, and James Fields Jr., he is being framed for the murder of Heather Heyer, and what they're trying to do here, the powers that be, they're trying to make an example out of him. They're trying to say, look, this is what we can do. We can frame you. We can spot you wherever you are, and then, as Stalin's crime czar said, he said, you show me the man, I'll show you the crime. This is exactly what's happening here. James Fields Jr. is an innocent man when it comes to the murder of Heather Heyer. And she was not murdered. Mind you, she had a heart attack on the scene. So obviously there's a lot going on here. And Jason Kessler, he's pretty much destroyed his whole credibility. He came out, it was a few months back, and I actually did a video about this where he was being interviewed by JF, Papa JF, and JF had asked him, just like what his new philosophy was. And Jason Kessler basically said, we need to appease the SPLC. And then JF was like, the SPLC, the one that called Stephen Molyneux alt-right? Are you serious, man? And he called him delusional right to his face, and Jason Kessler, he kind of laughed it off, but Jason Kessler cannot be trusted. The Unite the Right rally is essentially just controlled opposition. It has no standing whatsoever. I don't even believe in the alt-right anymore. I'm not an alt-righter, but I can at least speculate that is not associated with the alt-right. It's a total sham. It's controlled opposition, whatever you want to call it. Anything else here to add? I'm looking through the statements here. I'm not buying this whole line about him going to Dachau and being, quote, like a kid at Disney World. Not buying that at all. That's, they're doing this as a negative character reference for James Fields Jr. Obviously, they want to make him look as bad as possible. This is, I guess, a strategy to counter the fact that he's mentally ill. It's pretty sick, and I really do feel sorry for James Alex Fields Jr. because he is an innocent man in all this. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless. See you later.